Hello everyone, welcome, I'm Robert, and it's time for my updated 20, nay, 50 solo board games of all time. Why 50, you ask?
Because I like to go
30 steps.
beyond.
So yeah, originally I was going to do the usual top 20, but there's just so many great games out there that I want to discuss, man. It's like asking a parent to choose their 2 favorite kids out of 5. So without further ado, let's get started. First, there's a 5-layer deep stack of honorable mentions that I want to discuss. You know what they say. There can be only 50. Alright, let's start with Puzzle Dungeon. And it is very impressive. It's one of those games that does so much with just a deck of cards. It has a very nice, satisfying card play. Now, the reason why it's gone back in spots over the years is because there's a lot of little rules that you have to follow. There's like lots of triggers. It can be very detailed, and it's very easy to forget some of the triggers when you have a certain board state. You have to really pay close attention to the triggers. So I got a bit tired of that, but it is a very impressive game that does a lot with just a deck of cards, and I love the artwork and the nice card play. So a little gem that is only sold on Etsy by the author. So make sure that you look into this game if you want one of those, portable, semi-low footprint card games. Moving on, we have Orchard, another game that at some point ranked very high for me. It's very impressive, another game that does so much and offers such a nice, relaxing, satisfying puzzle with just some dice and a few cards. And there's another, this has become a trilogy now, and the author has made another couple games in the series. I've only played the one that came after, like the second one. I still need to try the third one, which is called The Forest, okay? But very nice game, another minimalistic gem, which if you have not tried, you can either buy it like this from the publisher or the print and play. Next, we have Kingdom Legacy Feudal Kingdom. This amazing little game came out this year, and it is definitely one of the best games that I have experienced this year. I made a standalone review for this. If you're interested, I'll leave links to that in the description. But this is another example of a game that does so much in a small box with just a few cards and some stickers. So as the name implies, it is a legacy game, so it really leans on the legacy elements of you permanently altering cards. You'll start with a kingdom of just a few cards, and over the course of the game, you're gonna increase the size of your kingdom, and you're gonna improve parts of your kingdom by rotating cards. It has a very nice, satisfying card play with a very, very light rule set. So just a smash hit from this year, and very affordable as well. You can check out my full review for my full thoughts on this, okay? But make sure that this doesn't fall under your radar. Next, we have Gloomhaven Buttons and Bugs, and this is another gem that came out this year. It's a small miniaturized version of Gloomhaven by one of my favorite designers, Joe Clipfield. And one cool thing that this game offers compared to the bigger counterparts of Gloomhaven is that you can play with just one character. And I don't feel that it sacrifices a lot or it compromises a lot. You still get a nice puzzle, and if you enjoy the Gloomhaven gameplay, it really does an amazing job translating it. I only played the first few scenarios. I need to actually dedicate some time to this and go through all the scenarios, but I did quite enjoy the few that I played, and it's also pretty affordable to boot. So if you have not looked into this game, make sure that you do. Next, we have Palm Island, another game that was in my top 20 at some point, and it got replaced by Dragons of Etchingstone, but it's still a lovely game, and it stands on its own as one of those great in-hand card games, okay? And it's different enough from Dragons of Etchingstone that both can live in your collection comfortably, and I never go on vacation or to the beach without taking this game with me. So it's just another classic, very light rule set, very satisfying gameplay. Next, we have Mike Lambo's Solitaire Wargame books, which you can buy from Amazon. So Mike Lambo is a very prolific designer who's been putting out these neat little wargame books where you directly play on the map, okay, on the pages of the book, and you buy them from Amazon, and you have to print or PMP the pieces that you use to move around the map, okay? So they have a very simple rule set, and yet it offers very interesting decisions, and it gives you that nice dose of history lessons that historical war games are known for. The gameplay is very reminiscent of the Commands and Colors series, and I just appreciate how easy this game is to learn and to play. I went through all the scenarios and I loved every minute of it, and it has such a simple rule set. I suggest that if you buy it, that you do the Spire bound treatment from your local bookstore. And if you want to hear my extended thoughts on this, I did shoot an individual review on it. I think you can't go wrong with most of his books. I have not bought any beyond this, but I do owe it to myself to buy a couple more. I've seen some of his titles that have definitely caught my attention. And from the reception I've read from his newer books, it looks like his books just keep getting better and better. So I'm excited to buy another one of his books. But make sure that you look into Mike Lambo's solitaire war games from Amazon. They're fantastic. Speaking of war games, we also have Warfighter. It's basically like an action movie simulator, and you're gonna outfit your squad of soldiers and give them, kind of like in SOCOM or Call of Duty, you're gonna give them weapons, attachments, gear, and you're gonna go on missions and you're gonna shoot bad guys. It's just fantastic, and there's tons of replayability because of variables during setup, the different soldiers that you have at your disposal, the different weapons, the different equipment, and you gain experience. And it has nice, snappy card play that I enjoy. I really need to give this a revisit. I'm just not looking forward to having to relearn the rules. And while the core sets have plenty of content, there's plenty of expansions out there, and you could make this a lifestyle game if you want it. Moving on, we have Under Falling Skies, and while this game is very ingenious and one of the best solo board games out there that you can get, I just don't feel like reaching for it very often because I found it a bit tough. I did appreciate a lot the fact that it includes a campaign. I don't tend to be a campaign guy, and it is perfectly suitable to just play in one-off sessions, but I actually was very impressed with the campaign, found it pretty cool. Never finished it, but yeah, just nice little game, but just based on my tastes, this is not something that I feel like reaching for very often, but amazing game nevertheless. Next, we have Space Hulk Death Angel. This is one of the first solo board games that I ever bought. I think it's within the first 5 or 10 that I ever bought. And it is a brutal game, but man, it is tense and just fun, especially when you pull off a win in this game. It's just fantastic how many emotions this little game with just a few cards and a brutal die that will hate you many times. It's crazy how many emotions it'll make you go through. Now, unfortunately, it is very much out of print, but it is a classic, and I need to give this game some much needed love. It has not hit the table in a while, but I wanted to mention this because it's not really shown up in any of my lists that I can recall, but it's such a nice little game. If you're willing to pay a pretty penny for a secondhand copy, it's a fantastic little experience. Next, we have Friday, and this game does a couple things that I really like. Number one, it's a deck builder, which is one of my favorite categories, and two, it is a from the ground up solo board game. So no multiplayer game with a solo mode or anything like that, no compromises, and it offers different level of challenges, and it's affordable, and it's also a small footprint and small box in your shelf. So it's a classic, and these days I mostly play the app, but I still have a soft spot for this game. Wanted to make sure I highlighted it in case you didn't know about it. Next, we have Ashes Reborn, and this is in one of my favorite categories, which is soloable trading / collectible card games. And the reason this doesn't rank higher for me is because while the solo mode is ingenious, the system itself of Ashes Reborn, I was not that impressed by. It did not give me the same thirst for deck construction that other games in the list that I'll discuss later do. But it is a very cool system nonetheless. While I appreciate the system for trying to correct some of the things that people don't like in trading card games, like getting mana screwed, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's more fun, but it definitely has some interesting takes on trading card game mechanics. For example, you choose your own opening hand rather than drawing it randomly, which is pretty interesting. So yeah, make sure to look into this system if you want to scratch that trading card game itch. I much prefer the other ones that I'll list later, but this seems to be a lot of people's number one. So that's Ashes Reborn. Next, we have Bullet, and this is a game that does a lot of things great. So it sets up relatively quick, has relatively small footprint, and it offers a very nice puzzly gameplay. You pick a heroine, and then you go up against a boss, and you're supposed to do this pattern matching game by pulling these tokens out of a bag, and you have to arrange them a certain way so that you can pull off combos. And it plays fantastic solo, and while it's also a multiplayer game, I don't feel that it compromises in any way when it comes to playing solo. It also has fantastic art, and it's a very unique game in my collection. I don't really have anything else like it. So make sure to give this game a look. It's a favorite among solo board gamers. Next, we have Warp's Edge, and this is a nice little solo-only backbuilding game with a cool sci-fi theme. Now, the reason it doesn't rank higher for me is because I don't tend to reach for it very often, but it's a nice, unique game. The shine might wear off a bit over time, especially if you don't buy expansions for it, but I just don't have any other game in my collection that does the backbuilding thing in such a satisfying way. So that's the main reason why I keep it, and I do pull this out on occasion. So yeah, it's not a game that's going to offer the most crunchy decisions, but it's perfectly suitable if you want to rotate between this and other games. It's a fantastic little game. Moving on, we have Lost Ruins of Arnak. And while this game is fantastic, the reason why it doesn't rank a bit higher for me is because when you only have the base game, it gets a bit samey. So you do have to add the expansions from what I've heard. I have them, I just haven't played it with the expansions yet. But when I did play just the base game, I enjoyed my time with it. But I kept getting the same score consistently, even at higher difficulties. So I need to give this another spin with the expansions. But this game has a fantastic, satisfying card play, and it has that worker placement element as well. I love the presentation and the components, and I do owe it to myself to finally give it a shot with the expansions. I've also heard that the campaign is also pretty good. And for my final honorable mention, I'm going to bring up Kingdom Death Monster. I finally got to play this legendary game this year, and I need to play it a bit more before I settle on where it should rank. But the reason I'm a bit wary of ranking it higher is because of the commitment of controlling 4 characters. There is a lot of upkeep related to this game and a lot of mental load that you have to be aware of. It's not a lot of people's cup of tea. It also has a pretty big price of entry, and I did not enjoy assembling the miniatures for this, unfortunately, even as an experienced hobbyist. But yeah, I mean, this game started the whole boss battler genre, and it's especially amazing in its emerging storytelling capabilities. And the boss battling system here, which is the first one I've ever tried, it really did leave an impression. It also has a fantastic presentation with its dark, grotesque, and risque art, which I adored. Even with just the core set, you have a ton of content. So especially if you can find this on sale, I would recommend looking into it. It might be your lifestyle game of choice. And I did shoot a full review of this. I'll publish it sometime in January, so be on the lookout for that. And now moving on to the main list. Starting at number 50, we have A Gentle Rain. And I've discussed this game in many of my lists. It's such a masterpiece of minimalism, and it is just so easy to get on the table. Just look at that. It's just front and back for the rulebook, and that's it. Okay, very easy. And it's unconventionally written. Okay, it's like first thing you see is take a deep breath and relax. So how cool is that? And it's such a simple game. All you have to do is shuffle this pile of tiles, and you're going to start placing them, and you're going to try to match these halves so that you're able to, within a corner, place these little tokens, okay? And if you actually manage to place all of them, congrats, because it's actually pretty tough. But yeah, it's such a relaxing game. I love the theme, the aesthetic of it, and I treasure my old first edition copy of it. And thank goodness that they reprinted this, because it was way overdue for a reprint. And they even have a new version that has plastic like 3D tokens. So yeah, check out A Gentle Rain. Such a masterpiece of minimalism. Moving on, we have Mr. President, the American Presidency. This is from GMT, one of my favorite publishers, and this is one of their solo-only games. And it's basically President Simulator in board game form. For a game of such scope, it is very impressive how it teaches you the game through these booklets where it walks you through every step of the turn. And initially, it's going to be a bit tough to gain a grasp of, the actions available to you because the scope of the game is so big, it's nuts. But once you do, this game could be one of those that you can leave up on a table indefinitely. The one thing that sucks a bit is the setup. The setup takes forever, but once you do, you could leave it set up and just have a playthrough for many hours. There's like 1 million tokens for this game, so some kind of storage solution will also come in very handy. But the game does such a good job of organically creating these emerging narratives through the events deck and rolling on the tables. It's pretty nuts how it creates that story during the scenarios. And yeah, there's many scenarios. There's like a sandbox mode, but there's also scenarios based on real life. But yeah, this is just a meaty, awesome game and just an achievement in design. I would be very interested to see how they can evolve this system, maybe create one that's a bit smaller in scope or in other countries or maybe in other periods of time. But yeah, this is one of the most impressive solo titles from GMT, and this was a pleasure to play. This is a game that I could leave on a table open if I had like an indefinite amount of tables for games. I could just leave it up in a table and sit down and play a few rounds every now and then. It's just a very impressive and fantastic title. Next, we have Apex Theropod, the deck building game. And this was featured recently in my top deck building games of all time. I really love what this box offers. It has a wealth of content, the artwork is gorgeous, and it clearly is inspired by the Legendary system, but to my taste, it makes it a lot more suitable for solo. And in fact, this is one of those cases where the multiplayer aspect of the game is more of an afterthought. So the best way to experience this game is to play solo. Do keep in mind that it is a bit brutal, okay? It can be kind of tough to win with certain combinations, but other than that, yeah, it's one of my favorite solo deck builders. Check it out. Moving on, we have Cascadia, and this is a game that serves as a perfect oasis between your big box games that are bloated and full of miniatures and super tough rules to learn. Cascadia just takes a few minutes to learn, a few minutes to set up, has incredible replayability thanks to its numerous tokens, and it barely has any table footprint to boot. It really is incredible what they accomplish with the few kinds of components. Just some animal wood tokens, bunch of tiles. There's so much replayability just by the way that setup works alone, but also there's tons of solo scenarios for you to explore. So Cascadia is just a banger of a title, and it's just so relaxing and soothing thanks to its nature theme. So if you have not checked this title out and you want a nice, soothing game to blow off some steam at the end of a hard work day, make sure that you give this a shot. Moving on, we have One Deck Dungeon, and this was one of the first solo board games I bought within my first few months of the hobby. I think I'm always going to regard it pretty highly because I just love what it accomplishes with just a few dice and some cards, and I love how compact it is. I love the variety of classes. I love the fact that you can play it in one-off sessions, or you can even do campaign sessions where you go to different dungeons and you gain experience basically and upgrade your hero. And there's also so many classes, especially if you combine the original box plus the Forest of Shadows. It also has relatively small footprint and it sets up relatively quick and sessions don't take you that long. I also love the app, by the way. Try out the app. I think it's fantastic. But yeah, this is just such an amazing title and a mainstay in my collection. Definitely, if I were to reduce my collection significantly, this would survive it. So that's a One Deck Dungeon. Next, we have Role Player, and this is just such a fantastic example of a fun, thematic Euro. This game is relatively easy to learn, but to me, it's just such a delight to play. It's basically the gamification of creating a D&D character. Now, I strongly suggest that you get the Monsters and Minions expansion. I really think it rounds up the experience, and there's just so much variety with the different classes and backgrounds that your character can get and alignments. And just through setup alone, you create a different puzzle every time with the different classes and different bosses that you can go up against at the end. To me, this is just such a delightful game to play, and also a great beginner game as I listed in my top 20 beginner solo games. So if you have not checked out Role Player, do yourself a favor and do so. Such a fantastic title. Moving on, we have Bloodborne, the board game. And I played it for the first time this year, and it definitely has made an impression. I shot an individual review for it. If you're interested, I'll link it in the description. And I featured it in multiple of my other lists because it just does so many things right. First, it's a fantastic dungeon crawler. Second, it's a great video game adaptation. And third, it plays so well solo. A lot of these dungeon crawlers demand that you control multiple characters because they're party-based, but this one is just so great and puzzly, just controlling your one character with fantastic card play and no need to roll dice, which I don't mind dice, but I do have to point out that this game, without the use of dice, provides a very interesting and puzzly combat system. And just the base game alone is so chock full of content. I really do believe that you don't need anything beyond the base set. I got the Chalice Dungeon expansion because it has that replayable dungeon thing, and I kind of regret it. I wasn't a fan of it. This game is campaign based, but it's just short campaigns. It's 3 mission campaigns, that's it. You could finish that in one day or a weekend. And they're pretty replayable. They're not always going to play out the same. So if you want to find out more details on how I feel about this game, just go ahead and check out my full review. But you really can't go wrong with this, especially if you find it on sale. Don't miss out. It's just such a good game. Great dungeon crawler, puzzly, just exquisite. Chef's kiss. Amazing title. Next, we have Everdell. And solo game or not, this is just a fantastic system, and there's a reason why people love it so much. The worker placement, the card play, the engine building, the resource conversion, the variable setup. It's just so good. And now, keep in mind that the only way that I've played this game is with the fan-made unrigged variant, which you can find in the file section of the game. I never even bothered to try the Rugward variant personally, but I am looking forward to trying the Nightweave variant. I'm just waiting for it to go on sale. Seriously, what is it with the prices of all the Everdell products? It's kind of nuts how they price things. It really makes you raise an eyebrow. But anyway, so yeah, this is just such a fantastic game. Every time I play it, it's just such a joy. I'm even looking forward to getting Farshore and Duo at some point. I just like the card play here that much. But yeah, if you have not tried Everdell, give it a shot, and I highly, highly encourage you to try the unrigged variant. I think it works out perfect, and eventually I'll definitely graduate to the Nightweave variant when I see it on sale, that is. So that's Everdell. Amazing title. Next, we have Elder Sign. Do you like Yahtzee? Maybe. Do you like Arkham Horror? Definitely. So maybe you'll like Elder Sign then. It somehow manages to take Yahtzee mechanics and give it a Arkham Horror theme, and it works out surprisingly well, and it plays fantastic solo. It has such a great aesthetic, and it's relatively easy to learn, and it has a modest footprint, and also a crazy amount of expansions. I do suggest that you get a few expansions eventually if you do like the game, because the base game can get a bit samey over time. But yeah, every time this hits the table for me, I have such an absolute blast. So if you want that Arkham Horror fix with a fraction of the rules complexity, and probably half the amount of time it would take you to play Arkham Horror or the card game, then Elder Sign is the title for you. Check it out. Next, we have Dungeons & Dragons Wrath of Ashardalon. And this title made a rebound to my collection this year. I had it within the first year of the hobby, but for whatever reason, I thought that I was over it and that I would never play it again, so I traded it. But many years later, and many dungeon crawling and adventuring games later, I kind of missed it and I felt like a bit of nostalgia for it, so I went ahead and purchased it again. And then it made me appreciate how much simpler it is than other dungeon crawlers, yet it offers that experience in a distilled manner without really sacrificing much of it. And this is just such an amazing value proposition. It comes with so many cool components, and especially the miniatures. I really feel that you get your money's worth with this title, especially if you get it on sale. If you manage to find this on sale, do not hesitate and buy this. And there's many titles in this series of D&D adventuring games, so take your pick. But from what I read, this is the best rounded out of all of them, and I do like the classic D&D enemies and classes that come in this set. So yeah, if you want the distilled dungeon crawling experience that's easy to learn and will scratch that D&D itch, look no further than Dungeons & Dragons Adventuring System. Next, we have Skytear Horde. This is another game that will scratch that TCG itch. It's heavily inspired by games like Hearthstone, and it does really live up to that. Now, I only played the original base game, the Kickstarter version when it came out, and since then, I've added the monoliths, and I've heard that they made some key changes that make the game a lot better. I have not had a chance to play it with the updated rules, but I am very much looking forward to that, and it might rank higher next year by the time I manage to do that. But yeah, this is another one of those games where you don't have to control 2 decks or 2 characters or anything like that. It plays great just piloting 1 deck. It offered some pretty neat deck construction options, even with all the content from the first wave of the Kickstarter. Although I'll say that one of my complaints at the time when I had played it with just that content from the first wave is that I wish there was more for deck building. I just wanted more of everything, basically. So the second wave answers that, and I'll see where this game lands next year by the time I get to finally play it with all the new content included. So yeah, if you want another game that scratches the TCG itch, sets up relatively quick, and is also relatively easy to learn, make sure to take a look at Skytear Horde. Moving on, we have Disney Lorcana. This came out this year with the Illumineer's Quest Deep Trouble box, which allows you to solo the game against an Ursula boss. And one thing I really love is these officially soloable systems. This really reminded me of Keyforge with the Rise of the Keyraken, which is one of my favorite experiences I've ever had because it really felt like playing Magic at home. And Lorcana takes a lot of inspiration from Magic, in case that you have not played it, and it really takes that archetypal TCG gameplay and it really distills it into a simple rule set. But it's just so much fun to play. And another thing I love about these types of systems is when they allow you to just play with a precon. There is no need to have a extensive collection or build an expensive deck. It includes difficulty modes that will cater to players who just want to pick up a precon. And this package includes everything you need. It has the boss and 2 decks. And of course, I didn't stop at that. I bought a bunch of other precons on sale because I just love TCG precons, and I really hope that they come up with more bosses, but I played this a ton this year and I loved every minute of it. So if you see this, especially on sale, do not hesitate and check the Lorcana Illumineer's Quest out. And this even comes from someone who doesn't really care for Disney. Like, I can give or take it. I'm not like a Disney fan or anything. And I also shot a full review of this, which I'll leave it in the description if you want to hear my extended thoughts on it. But yeah, Lorcana, one of the best experiences I've had this year. Moving on, we have Shadowrun Crossfire. This is one of my favorite solo deck builders of all time, and I featured it recently on my top solo deck builders list, which you should check out. I'll leave links in the description. But this game and I spent a few weeks, and they were just glorious. So in this game, you're gonna pick a role, and while you could technically play with just one character, I think it's best with 2 or more. So I picked 2 characters, and you go on missions, which are pretty brutal, and it uses a legacy light element where at the end of missions, especially if you're successful, you're gonna collect these karma points. And man, it really trickles out those karma points very slowly, but you do need them because you're gonna use them to improve your character. So there's this element where you add abilities and improvements to your character very slowly though. And those missions are gonna be hard, man, but as you improve your characters, they're gonna start getting easier, and then there's missions that you can tackle after that are higher level, higher difficulty, but they reward more karma. So I really enjoyed the gameplay loop here, despite the difficulty of it. And there's just so many classes, so many missions, especially if you add the expansion. I think this is way overdue for a reprint, so it's kind of hard to find, unfortunately. But when you add the High Caliber Ops expansion, this is just such a beautiful experience. And some people make a comparison between this and Mage Knight because of the brain burn that it offers, and I do agree. So it is a lighter rule set and lower footprint, quicker setup, and the way that you have to puzzle with your cards here to tackle the enemies that are thrown at you, the brain burn is very reminiscent of Mage Knight because you have to play cards in a certain order to get the best result. And I did hear that this is getting a new expansion soon, hopefully with a reprint. So you can either wait for that or just pick this up secondhand. But yeah, just one of the best solo deck builders you can get. Shadowrun Crossfire. Moving on, we have Terraforming Mars Ares Expedition. I didn't enjoy the original Terraforming Mars in physical form, but I do play the app pretty often. I think the app implementation is fantastic. One of my biggest issues with the original Terraforming Mars was the aesthetic. I just didn't like the stock pictures and just the design of the board. That pretty much is it. But it is a fantastic puzzle, and the app solves that for me because it just looks a lot cooler. And then in physical form, you have this, and this is how I get my physical Terraforming Mars fix. And it also takes some inspiration from Race for the Galaxy, which is a favorite game of mine in app form, and also Jump Drive, right? So it takes some notes from that system, and I do personally really like how they implemented that phases system here. And it's relatively quick to learn, quick to play, small footprint, so just a fantastic tableau builder. I think the solo mode also works pretty well here. And personally, I'm pretty happy with just the base game. I looked at the expansions and I don't see how much they could add, but if you have any opinion on the expansions, please let me know in the comment section. But so far, I've been really happy with this, and it's just one of the easiest tableau builder, engine builders that I can just pull out, relearn in a couple minutes and play. So just fantastic title, looks gorgeous, tons of replayability, and great solo mode. That's Terraforming Mars Ares Expedition. Moving on, we have Naturopolis, and this is the only button shy game in my list, and I would say this is my favorite. Although I also played Ancient Realm this year, and I quite enjoyed it. And I could go back and forth between that one and Naturopolis as my top button shy game. I guess it just depends on which theme you prefer. But they are just great examples of what you can do with an 18 card deck as your component limitation. It's pretty crazy, and I do love the puzzle on both games. And now I did also play Sprawlopolis. I personally much prefer Naturopolis. I think the goals in this version of the system are a lot more refined, okay? And it's the third entry in the series, so I really do think that the designer learned a lot from their Sprawlopolis design, and I would have a hard time coming back to Sprawlopolis after playing this one. But yeah, for this year, I'm gonna put Naturopolis in front, but do take a look at Ancient Realm as well. I really like both titles. I just wasn't sure which one to place, but I'll go ahead and give it to Naturopolis this year. Just some of the best games that Button Shy has to offer. Next, we have It's a Wonderful World, and this is a superb tableau builder. It is so easy to learn, and the solo mode just works great. So you can play just one-off sessions, but there's also scenarios that you can explore. And if you enjoy something like Terraforming Mars, this takes that engine building and just distills it into such simplicity, yet it still offers great decision making. I'll say the one shortcoming of the game is the theme. The theme just feels so disconnected from this. It's like a pseudo civilization theme, but it just does not come across at all. You could basically wrap this in any theme, but nevertheless, just the gameplay is just fantastic. The tableau building is great. It plays quick, easy to learn, just great. The only thing is the theme just doesn't really make any sense here. So if you want like a thematic touch to your game, the theme is not the forte of this, but yeah, if you enjoy tableau builders, this is just one of the best ones you can get. And one reason why I avoided it for the longest time is because like the game, It's a Wonderful World, like what does that mean? Like the title, the game, the aesthetic of it, like it did not really communicate anything. But don't worry about that. Just don't let this game go under your radar. Make sure that you look into it, especially if you like tableau builders. Check out It's a Wonderful World. Next, we have Imperial Settlers, Empires of the North, and this is one of the best tableau builders that I have played. So this is an evolution of the 51st State system, and while I did enjoy that game, I much prefer how this plays. So when you play this solo, this is scenario based, and with the combination of which scenario you want to play and all the civilizations that are included, you have tons of replayability. And there's also fan-made scenarios, and they are very good, they're very well made, and I compiled them in this fan-made scenario booklet, which you can find in the files section. I'll also leave a link, okay? But this is just such a cool, chill tableau builder, and it's another one of those games where it's always your turn, which I just talked about. It's a Wonderful World, and that's the case there as well. With a lot of these tableau builders, there's no AI to maintain, so it's always your turn, and you can just pause and whatnot. It's just great when it comes to that. So no AI upkeep, and the presentation here is great. There's a cool resource conversion. There's lots of effects. There's this mechanic where you conquer these islands that you add to your tableau for abilities and bonuses. And by the way, like speaking of the presentation, the art in this game is just amazing. I just love the art, which has like this god view of the like a above view of the areas. Almost has this like Where's Waldo-esque quality to them, where you can look closely and there's in-jokes and there's just so much detail. Like the illustrations here are just a delight to look at. Like each tiny illustration tells a story. It's just some of the best illustrations that I've ever seen in a board game. I was very looking forward to the Legacy campaign expansion for this game, but unfortunately it looks like they kind of dropped the ball on that one, which is sad because I really like this system. Maybe they'll flesh it out at some point. But yeah, if you want some amazing tableau builder, take a look at Imperial Settlers Empires of the North. And also, if you prefer the post-apocalyptic theme, also take a look at 51st State. I did quite enjoy it, and a lot of people consider that one of their favorite games within their many people's top 10, top 20s. A lot of people enjoy that one, so take a look at 51st State. That's also a great game. I do personally prefer this one. Moving on, we have Hoplomachus Remastered. And this is a game of gladiatorial combat. It's a skirmish game that takes place using this mat that the game includes, this glorious mat. And you're going to be picking a faction for you to control and any faction to go up against, okay? And each faction is going to have a myriad of units, okay, to select from with different abilities. And it is one of the best packages that is offered by Chip Theory Games. So if you want an example of the Chip Theory Games experience, you can just purchase this, and there's no need for expansions. I do highly suggest that you get the premium health chips with this. I wish I had bought them. I did. I'm just waiting for them to arrive. But yeah, I just wish that they included the premium chips and just included it in the price already, because it just makes a pretty big difference, believe it or not. But yeah, so you're going to be resolving combat through dice. If you don't like dice, then steer clear from this game. But there's a couple of modes, so you can just do the skirmish mode where you pick two factions to go up against, and then there's this boss mode, if you will, where you go up against a titan or a god on the other side of the mat, okay? And the rule book is, I'm not going to say that the rules are super simple per se, but the rule book is just so well done that it's going to be relatively breezy to learn this system. And it sets up in a couple minutes, literally. That's another great virtue of this game. You just literally open the box, set up the mat, and bring out the dice, pick up a couple factions, and you're pretty much set. Literally, in less than 5 minutes, you're going to be setting up this game and playing. And I have also looked at Hoplomachus Victorum. I'm not much of a campaign guy, as I've said before, but people say it's just so good that I'm actually starting to get tempted to buy Victorum. I think I'm gonna wait for a sale or something, because it's just these Chip Theory games. In case you don't know, they come at a premium because of the components and whatnot. But yeah, so you can't go wrong with this. Okay, I really love this package. You don't need expansions. It's just everything you need in this box. It'll bring you a great skirmishing solo experience, which, by the way, there's not a whole lot of choices in that category. It almost feels like a miniatures war game, except it uses these chips to represent the units instead, so not miniatures. But yeah, so if you want that skirmishing solo experience with the epic components and widescreen ratio or quality, look no further than Hoplomachus. Moving on, we have Uwe Rosenberg's Nusfjord. And I don't tend to gravitate too much towards pure Euros like this one. As you'll tell from my collection, I do tend to gravitate a bit more towards some very trashy and thematic games. But this is a lovely package that offers a experience that is relatively easy to learn, sets up quick, has a modest table footprint, and will offer some really cool decision making and has tons of replayability thanks to the different fish decks that are included, especially if you get the extra decks from expansions. And it also has a nice variable setup. Even if you use the same fish deck, you're not going to see the same buildings in the same playthrough. So you could play over and over with the same deck and you'll still get a lot of mileage out of it. There's other pure euros in my shelf of shame that I need to try, like At the Gates of Loyang and Gaia Project. So once I try those, we'll see where they land with me compared to this. But this was one of my first pure euros and the first and only title that I've tried from Rosenberg. Ooh, and I almost forgot. I also have A Fist for Odin. I really, really need to give those games a try. But yeah, if you want a beautiful Uwe Rosenberg title that offers some cool decision making with tons of replayability, easy to learn, and relatively small footprint, look no further than Nusfjord. Moving on, we have Spirit Island, and you might be a bit shocked why it doesn't rank that high for me. And while I really love a lot of the things that the game does, I just don't feel the itch to pull this off the shelf very often, honestly. And I think that's because I feel the game is a bit anticlimactic the way it ends. But keep in mind that I have not tried the Branch and Claw expansion yet. I've only played the base game, and I've enjoyed my time with it. I've even played Horizons. I really like the lower complexity spirits in that set. And I've had a good time with this, but yeah, I just... most of the games, pretty much every game ahead in the list, I would rather play than this. But maybe my opinion will change once I try the Branch and Claw expansion with the Events deck. But this does offer a fantastic brain-burning experience, and it's crazy how it pulls that off with a relatively simple rule set that is also relatively easy to remember, even if you come back to it many months later, and it caters to whatever level of difficulty you want. It's crazy the level of modularity that this game offers with the adversaries and and how difficult you want them to be, the different complexity levels with the spirits. And I think that when you control 2 spirits, it's ideal, but the brain burn can be so much, it's crazy. So not a lot of people are going to be equipped for that. I have been able to handle 2 spirits more or less, but it really pushes the mental load on me, definitely. A lot of spirits work okay just if you control one of them, but you miss out on a lot of the interactions and possible combos when you don't play with more than one spirit. And yeah, not everybody's gonna be willing to play with 2, but it does play great even with one spirit, so if you want to keep it that way. Okay, but yeah, so Spirit Island, fantastic system. I just I don't feel the itch to play it as much as other titles, but I'll be crazy not to bring it up on the list. So yeah, Spirit Island, amazing title. Next, we have Dungeon Degenerates, Hand of Doom. And this is part of one of my most beloved categories, and that's board gamified RPGs, okay? Which I made a video recently of what I consider my top 20 in the category, okay? And this really is one of the best in its kind. Now, originally, I avoided it because of the art, but not only did it grow on me, I actually fell in love with it. I love the aesthetic of this game, and there's no other game in my collection that looks like it. But not only does it look great, it actually plays fantastic. So this is a game where you'll do these short campaigns that are only going to be a handful of missions long. So assuming that you don't die early on, you'll get the feel of a D&D campaign over a weekend just after a couple sessions. And it plays fantastic controlling a couple characters. Although you could play with one character, but I feel that you miss out on some fun interactions if you limit it to one character. And the classes here are very unconventional. You're not going to have like your typical dwarf cleric or something like that. There's very wacky classes that are included here, like the long-nosed witch and whatnot. The Overland map also has a bit of a pandemic thing going on where areas around the map become more dangerous as time progresses. Although the game has a lot going on, the rulebook is exceptionally well written. But yeah, I'm not going to say the game is exactly simple, but the rulebook is so well done that you're not going to have trouble learning it if you dedicate the time to it. And just the base box is packed with content, but if you want to go all in and buy like a million expansions, they are available for this system. And it has a very unconventional setting called War Strike, and it feels very detailed and lived in, and it definitely has a bit of a sense of humor and a style with the type of denizens that you'll encounter in it. So if you want a D&D style game in a box that has an unconventional art style, color palette, and setting, look no further than Dungeon Degenerates, one of the best in its genre. Moving on, we have Scythe, and there's a lot of things going on with this game. So it has 4X elements, there's also area control, engine building, and it's just a fantastic puzzle all around. It also scores a 10 out of 10 when it comes to the component quality and presentation. Just the artwork by itself is a selling point. One of the coolest things about this game is the automa that was designed for it. I think it runs super smooth, and it also works well when you want to play against multiple opponents. Every time I play this game, it's just such a delight, and there's so much replayability thanks to the combinations of boards and factions. Especially if you add expansions, it just explodes. And this game is also very competitive, so if you really want to dive deep into a game and get good at it and reach that ceiling of expertise when you have a certain board and faction combinations and learning the best strategies for each and the best strategies for when you are pitted against certain factions. There's just so much to learn. It's just one of those games that if you wanted to invest the time to master it, you totally could. I've also heard great things about the Rise of Fenris campaign expansion. I haven't gotten around to playing it, but just playing the base game with this, I've had an absolute blast. There's also a Scythe app that will allow you to run the AI even easier, but I have kept it physical with the AI decks, and I've enjoyed my time a lot with it. So if you want a game that combines so many elements well, like fantastic art, detailed world, great replayability, crunchy decisions, and easy to run AI, Scythe is definitely an option. Next, we have Pathfinder Adventure card game, and this is the 2019 revised core set. So this was my intro to the Pathfinder Adventure card game system, which has been around for quite a while. And basically what this is, it's a RPG in card form. Okay, so if you want a D&D-esque game where you have your party of characters and you roll a bunch of dice, man, do I have the game for you. Although the gameplay loop for this game is relatively simple, this game has one of the densest rulebooks that I've ever read. So it took some effort to internalize this, but the upside of the rulebook being so dense is that it pretty much answers any question imaginable that you might have. So I didn't really ever have to visit BGG, and this game really just kept me magnetized to my table for weeks. It's just one of those games that you could leave on your table for weeks and months even. And because of its self-imposed limitation of keeping everything in card form, the way that they translated an RPG experience to work with just cards is very creative. The way that it uses decks of cards for locations that you visit, the way that it uses cards to represent enemies like objects, traps, loot, your character, and the way that you manipulate those cards by putting them on your discard pile, on your hand, tucking it under your deck, putting it on top, putting it in front of your character. So it utilizes cards in every way imaginable to translate effects creatively into the system. And it is campaign based, so it's not the type of game that you're gonna play one-off sessions. So you're gonna have your party of characters that over the course of a few adventures, they'll level up, they'll acquire stats increases and improved abilities. And also your character's health is represented by their deck, so if their deck runs out of cards, they die. But there's ways of increasing their deck size, which will let you add more loot, more abilities, which in turn means higher health. And some people get sick of the constant dice chucking. I mean, it's just test after test. That's what this game is about. You're gonna be moving your characters around locations and boosting each other's abilities and doing tests to overcome obstacles or gain loot. And yeah, it's just gonna be a dice chuck fest. And if you don't like that, yeah, steer clear from this game. But I absolutely adored it, and it checks the boxes of being an RPG in a box, which is a favorite category of mine, but it also has a deck construction element. How you build your character and what loot you decide to add to their deck, what abilities, that's a very cool element to it that is not common in this type of game. So it is a super fun system, and if you do decide to get it, make sure that you get extra sets of dice because trust me, you're gonna need them. That's Pathfinder, the adventure card game. Moving on, we have Cartographers, which is the only verbatim ride game on my list. So as you'll see, I'm not big into that category, but Cartographers is just such a good game that I could play it anytime. It's very easy to learn and it's so minimalistic. It's just a couple decks of cards and your sheet, a pen, that's it. And I love that you can be super creative with how you draw your map. If you want to keep it simple, you can. If you want to be super creative and draw a beautifully illustrated map, you also could. Not to mention it's affordable and also beautifully illustrated in its own right. And it's just a delightful puzzle, man. I love figuring out how to draw the shapes for best effect for the highest score. And it has this polyomino Tetris thing going on, which I really appreciate because I don't have a whole lot of games in my collection that do the polyomino thing that I enjoy, but this one is just superb. So yeah, that's Cartographers, my number one Verbum right. We'll see if that changes once I finally play my copy of Hadrian's Wall. And if you do buy Cartographers, make sure to also buy colored pens for the best experience. Next, we have D-Day Dice 2nd Edition, and this is another game that made a return to my collection. I originally purchased it with all Kickstarter expansions, but at the time I was actually kind of overwhelmed and I didn't even know how to integrate them. I was pretty new to the hobby and I enjoyed the base set okay, but then it's like, what am I doing with all of these expansions? Too much content. So I just let go of all of it. And then, I kind of missed it, so I decided to get the base game, and then I realized that the base game by itself is actually kind of brutal. So this is one of the few exceptions where you actually should buy as many expansions as you can, because by adding expansions you can customize the difficulty level, and the expansions do really add a lot of fun mechanics. So I suggest that if you get this, get whatever expansions you can get your hands on. And one way I've heard this game described is basically like a roll and write without the writing part. So you could very easily translate this game as is into a roll and write form if you wanted to replace the small cards for just boxes on a sheet that you check. So that honestly checks out perfectly fine, because you also have these resources that you have to manage, which you could just write down on a sheet rather than using everything physically. So I love that it feels like a roll and write, but it doesn't really do the writing part. It offers you all the components for it. And I love the variety of maps. I love all the gear that you can outfit. I love the little differences between the regiments that you can choose to control while playing. And yeah, man, this is just a system that I absolutely did not mind going all in and buying everything, because it's just such a delight to play. It's just so much fun. And just one of the best uses of the Yahtzee mechanics in board games. Just absolutely superb. Love D-Day Dice. Moving on, we have another RPG in a box, and that's Gloom of Kilforth, a fantasy quest game. So just like Pathfinder adventure card game, this is completely card driven, and you're gonna pick a character and a class, and you're gonna create this procedurally generated map, and you're gonna traverse it, and you're gonna have a limited amount of days to prepare yourself to defeat an ancient at the end. And along the way, you're gonna find allies, loot, go on quests, and you're gonna be rolling lots of dice to resolve your tests like fight and sneak tests. So one of the coolest things about this game is the artwork. Just look at that, man. It's just absolute eye candy. Another really cool thing about this game is that it's meant to be played just controlling one character, so no need to manage a party and all the tedious upkeep that comes with that. And even when just talking about the base box, between the different combinations of character classes and races, and also the different ancients that you're gonna face, this game is extremely replayable. Just a fair warning, the one downside of this game is that it is a bit of a pain to learn. It is very unique. It doesn't really play like any other game in my collection, and the rulebook is not the best, so it will take some effort to internalize these rules, but once you do, I think it totally pays off. And I do own everything for this game, the whole trilogy, including Shadows and Call, and I even have the big playmats. However, I highly suggest that if you want to get into this system, that you start with Gloom of Kilforth, and if you like it, you can look at the other entries. But yeah, for my money, this is one of the best soloable RPGs in a box that you can buy today. Gloom of Kilforth. Moving on, we have Folklore the Affliction, and this is one of my absolute favorite RPGs in a box. It has pretty much everything you could wish for if you wanted to experience D&D from the comfort of your home. The only downside is that you have to control at least 3 characters for an optimal experience, but if you're willing to tolerate that, you're in for an amazing experience. This game does so many cool things. First, it has a storybook that you use for your missions, but as you progress throughout the story, you're gonna transition between different scopes. So in some instances, you're gonna be doing an overland adventure where you're gonna have random encounters, then you're gonna move to town. You're also gonna have skirmishes, which are mini combat encounters that don't utilize the full board. But once you arrive at certain areas, you're then going to pull out these map tiles where you move your miniatures into them and start actually doing dungeon crawling. And if you want the pen and paper element of actually updating your stats and adding bonuses and whatnot, which is very akin to how the pen and paper D&D experience is. But at the same time, the game is very much board gamified because it has tons of cards, tons of tokens to represent things, so it very minimally uses the pen and paper element, but I really adore how it's a bit of a hybrid. So yeah, this is one of the most fascinating experiences that I've ever had, and I do owe it to myself to actually go through all the stories and the Dark Tales expansion stuff because it's just so good. I think that one day, if I reduce my collection significantly, I'll make sure to dedicate some time to this because there's just so much goodness in this box, man. So yeah, that's Folklore the Affliction, one of the best RPGs in a box you could buy today. Next, we have Aeon's End and Astro Knights. So just like in my top deck building games of all time, this one is going to be a bit of a cop-out because I don't want this system occupying 2 spots on the list. And just to be clear, if I had to pick one, I definitely would go with Aeon's End. But I do want to bring up both because they're very similar and it's basically just a matter of taste. So if you want something slightly more streamlined and with the sci-fi theme, you can go with Astro Knights. I did definitely appreciate the changes that they made here, but it wasn't enough for me to want to get rid of Aeon's End. I really do still like it, and to me it's a classic, and if you have not tried this system, it's basically a co-op deck building boss battler game where you pick 2 or more characters that each have unique powers, and then you're gonna also create a market, okay? In the Aeon's End case, that is, it can be random, or you can actually plan the market of cards that's gonna be available to you ahead. So there is a bit of a puzzle of picking which cards should be included in the market for most effectively defeating each boss, which is very interesting. And it's relatively easy to learn, and I really like how the bosses are designed and how they have minions, so it's just a fun game to play all around, very cool system. And I know there's like a million versions of this that each have their own spin. I'm honestly very content with just having Aeon's End and this entire cycle with its own expansions, and same with Astro Knights. And there's entire guides out there on where you should start if you're seeking certain aspects of the game. So take your pick, Aeon's End or Astro Knights. Can't go wrong with either. Moving on, we have Heroes of Might and Magic 3, the board game. So this game came out this year and I made a whole bunch of content around it. I made a full 40-minute review where I discuss it in depth. I also made 3 solo playthroughs if you want to check out how it plays. I'm going to leave links in the description. But the short of it is that I think this is a really cool game that translates its source material very faithfully in board game form, but it's not without its flaws. So first of all, this game is a victim of Kickstarter miniature bloat. This game forces you to buy it with some of the most unnecessary miniatures that I've ever seen. I just really wish that they offered a miniature-less version of this, as gorgeous as they are. But most egregious of all is the fact that this is yet another IP-based game that collects millions of dollars in a crowdfunding campaign, and yet they can't bother to put out a half-decent rulebook. So yeah, the rulebook that came with this game is an absolute embarrassment. However, some very passionate fans took it upon themselves to rewrite the rulebook to great result. So if you're willing to download the fan-made version of the rulebook, I think this is a fantastic title. So the way that solo works here, it's scenario-based, so there are mini campaigns that are 3 missions long. And it is similar to Mage Knight, and while it might not be as refined or brain-burny as Mage Knight, I really like how this differs from it and offers its own things. For example, the town management where you construct your buildings in order to get better units or cool effects, the leveling up of your hero by adding abilities and artifacts that you find by looting different areas during exploration, and also the different factions and the different units. Yeah, once you get past the rules, this experience to me is an absolute delight. And it really does benefit from expansions because you'll make your ability and artifact deck thicker, and also you'll add more neutral units to fight against during scenarios. So make sure that you do your research before you decide to get this, but for my money, I think it is amazing if you use the fan-made rulebook. And I revisited this many months after my review and playthroughs, and I still stand by everything I said in it. So if you want to find out more details, go ahead and check out my full review and playthroughs to see what it's like, and I'll leave links in the description. Moving on, we have Slay the Spire, the board game, and I think that other publishers who want to adapt video games into board game form should take notes from Contention Games. 1. This game has no unnecessary miniature bloat, and 2. It has a not shit rulebook at launch. I know, sounds crazy, right? So yeah, this came out this year, and all cynicism aside, I think this is an amazing video game adaptation and one of the best deck builders that you can get. It's very faithful to its source material, and it's very easy to learn, especially if you've played the video game it's based on. It plays so well solo, there's no need to control multiple characters or anything like that, and this game is packed with content, man. It's not exactly budget priced, but you definitely will get your money's worth. And it really doesn't feel like they compromised that much to make this into board game form. In fact, I do really appreciate the changes they made, especially the lower damage and defense values, which makes every card play feel ever more impactful. Now, unlike other titles in the deck building genre, you're not gonna be adding so many cards to your deck at such a quick pace. It's a lot more slow and methodical. As I mentioned in my standalone review of this, the one thing I found slightly annoying compared to the video game counterpart is having to reset everything at the end, putting your cards back in the decks they belong to. That part is a bit depressing compared to the video game where you just press a button and you're ready to go. So if you have not played Slay the Spire, the board game, make sure that you look into it, because not only is it one of the best video game to board game adaptations ever made, it's just an amazing solo board game in its own right, period. Alright, so we finally arrived at the top 20, and let's start with Jump Drive. This is basically a streamlined version of Race for the Galaxy, a game that I brought up earlier, which I only play in app form, but I was obsessed with it for a while and still revisit it every now and then. But I'm really glad that this exists in physical form, because thanks to a fan-made solo mode, this is a fantastic game that only has a front and back for rules. Just look at that, just long sheet, front and back. So it's super easy to learn. It has a very minimal footprint, and it plays quick. It's basically a tableau builder that plays in about 10 to 15 minutes, but the way that the solo mode works is you play up to 4 games in succession. So as you win more games, it becomes tougher because you have less options for how you want to win the game. So it's actually pretty tough depending on which campaign you choose. It can be pretty tough to actually win all 4 games in a row as you run out of options for how you want to win the game. And the fan-made mode is so popular that it became an official mode that is included in the Terminal Velocity expansion, which sadly I have not given it its deserved time, but I know that when I first opened this, I was absolutely obsessed with it for weeks. So that's Jump Drive, another great example of what you can do with a simple rule set and just a thick deck of cards and some tokens. An absolute blast to play. Moving on, we have Dragons of Etchinstone, and this is my undisputed king of portable games. No game does more with less components. Somehow the designer managed to distill the essence of Mage Knight and make it work with just a deck of 18 cards. I also love the fact that you don't have to play it in your hand if you don't want to. You can just play it on a board and it works perfectly fine. So this is actually a second copy that I got because I went ahead and got a second copy with the Northvale expansion. I have not given it time yet. I need to try the Northvale expansion. I do normally carry my copy, my sleeved copy with perfect fit sleeves in one of these, so I suggest that you do that. It's awesome. And pretty much the only thing I wished for when I reviewed this game originally is that, number one, that there was a plastic card version available, kind of like Palm Island offers that, and also cooler illustrations. While there's nothing technically wrong with the illustrations that the game comes with, I just thought that the characters looked a bit too friendly. That's really it. I just wanted something a bit grittier, and believe it or not, I actually, during my original review, I kind of wished that it had the same art that Chip Theory Games Too Many Bones, like the little art that you see in the chips. And as it happens, Chip Theory Games actually went ahead and picked up this game. So it looks like my 2 wishes will be granted for the perfect portable game once it comes to crowdfunding later next year. Man, are they seriously gonna make me buy this game a 3rd time? Only one designer has gotten away with that, and that's Jason Glover. But it looks like I'm definitely gonna have to pony up the money for a 3rd copy because I just really want those plastic cards. In the meantime, you can buy a copy from the Game Crafter, or you can purchase a PMP copy from PMP Arcade. So don't miss out on this amazing little title. Moving on, we have After the Virus, and this is just another amazing example of what you can do with just some cards, some tokens, and a simple rule set. It's one of the most creative deck builders out there, and I ranked it number 1 in my top deck builders list. Now keep in mind that compared to my top deck builders list, I did move some guys around for this list because I'm ranking them on other attributes other than evaluating them within their own genres. But anyway, I did crown this my top number 1 deck builder of all time because I think that it does so much with much less compared to other games. But yeah, don't let the underwhelming art fool you, because it's not just me. A lot of people bring up the fact that the art is a turnoff, which is unfortunate because this is such an amazing game and the art is not reflective with the quality of design here. And trust me, even for me, who originally avoided it because of the art actually grew on me. This game plays very fast, sets up fast, it has many scenarios varying in difficulty, it has so much replayability thanks to its numerous characters, especially if you download the promo characters. It even has a campaign expansion, which I've yet to try, and it's one of the few games that I've awarded my dopamine seal of approval. Because this game, man, it just hits different. You know what I'm saying? Moving on, we have Space Empires 4X, or, as I affectionately like to refer to, Master of Orion, the board game, even though there's an actual Master of Orion board game. But yeah, this is another banger title from GMT Games, and it is the absolute best soloable 4X game that you're gonna find. Some people like to refer to this game as Excel, the board game, and they might not necessarily be wrong, because the way that you're gonna be managing your empire's growth and resources is with a sheet. So you're gonna be doing some math and adding up the resources that all of your solar systems contribute. So there's going to be some of that going on. I didn't mind it. I think it's pretty cool. And you're going to have this big board with solar system hexes. And you're going to, during setup, you're going to add these exploration tokens. So I love the sense of exploration that this game offers, moving up your scouts and exploring systems and discovering cool planets waiting to be exploited. But you'll also find cool encounters like black holes and whatnot. And the solo mode works so well here. There's a couple options. You have the Doomsday device, which is very simple. You basically have a set amount of turns to prepare your empire for this incoming Doomsday machine. And it's going to be pretty tough to beat if you don't prepare properly. But there's also an Alien Empire mode where you have actual simulated players with their own empires who are going to be throwing ships at you, and you're going to have to go to their bases and defeat them. And there's expansions which I have yet to open, but yeah, no other game will give you such a good 4X experience that is soloable in board game form. That's Space Empires 4X, such a classic. Next, we have Ark Nova. This is one of the most satisfying puzzles that I've experienced. It's crazy how it combines so many elements, but they all intertwine so well. It has a rotating, upgradable card ability row that seems to have been inspired by Civilization: A New Dawn, which is a really cool mechanic to begin with, but then you combine that with Polyomino and also tableau building, and it just all combines beautifully. It's like that ratatouille thing where you have each ingredient separately, but when you combine them in your mouth, it's like, just delicious. And I think the solo mode that is included with the box works perfectly fine. I don't have to control an automa. I don't feel that I miss out too much on not having use from some of the take-back mechanics that are included in some of the cards. I love that I can just focus on my own puzzle. People rave like crazy about the fan-made Arno solo mode, which sounds cool, but I just don't see myself wanting to try it when there's much more rules to learn and upkeep involved with that. I just think that the solo mode here works so well. The timer is pretty tight, but it does give you room to get your engine going. And it's just so satisfying seeing everything come together at the end with your zoo being built and also all of your symbols paying off. It's just fantastic, man. I just love every time I play this, and it's just a game that I would be willing to play it whenever. It's just so good. And unlike Terraforming Mars, which I definitely think that there's some parallels between this and Terraforming Mars, believe it or not, I did not mind the use of stock imagery here. I actually think it works out really well. And the replayability here, by the way, it's crazy. There's so many zoo boards that you can use with different abilities, and also it comes with a thick deck of cards. No two playthroughs will be the same. When you do a solo playthrough, you barely see a small portion of the deck. And imagine if you have the expansion, which I ordered it. It hasn't arrived yet, but people rave about it. So I'm excited to try this with the expansion. Just an amazing puzzle all around, man. Ark Nova. Next, we have Iron Helm. This is solo from the ground up dungeon crawler by indie designer Jason Glover. You can purchase this from the Game Crafter or download the PMP files from PMP Arcade. And remember earlier when I said that Jason Glover is the only person who's made me buy a game 3 times? So yeah, this is somehow the game that I ended up buying 3 times. The first time I bought it, it didn't do much for me. Don't know why. But then But then I saw the PMP files on sale, and then I made the PMP version of that, which I kind of regret because it took way too much effort. But anyway, so once I finally got my PMP put together, I played it and I was absolutely obsessed when I started playing it. And I don't know why, it just didn't click the first time. I didn't have an issue with the rules, I understood them. I just don't know why the first time it didn't do anything for me. Like I played it a couple times and I thought it was okay, but that's it. But then the second time with the PMP version, I was just hooked. It was like a drug, man. So I then went and downloaded all the PMPs, and then I realized not all expansions are available in PMP form. And it's like, damn it, am I gonna have to buy it again? So yeah, I had to because I just wanted all the expansions, man. And this is just such an amazing system. So then I went and bought a Game Crafter copy again with all the expansions, and it's just that good. So much so that it's one of the only few games that I've awarded my dopamine seal of approval, because it seriously feels like injecting dopamine directly into your veins when you play this game. I really don't have another way to describe it. I do also really like the simpler original game that started this system, and that's Desolate. And that's a sci-fi version with all black and white art. So if you want to try that game, which is cheaper and also relatively easy to PMP, if you want to get the PMP files, you can get an idea of what the system is like. And then there's also Tin Helm, which is the miniature version of this in TIM form. And it does change the system slightly, but it works out really well, and it's one of the best portable adventuring games you can get. But yeah, assuming that you don't get destroyed early on due to bad luck from the dice, if you manage to make it through the dungeon and defeat the boss, and if you have expansions, you can then take your powerful character and move to a much more difficult dungeon with much higher rewards. So that's what most of the expansions are, just higher level dungeons. There's a couple general expansions that you can buy just to enhance the base game. But yeah, there's like a million expansions for this. So if you want to expand on this system, just go on the Game Crafter. It's like a kid in a candy store. And sorry to people outside of the US. I know that shipping is a bitch. But yeah, that's Iron Helm, just a fantastic solo dungeon crawler with amazing hand-drawn artwork from Jason Glover. Just a classic. And yeah, in case you're wondering, the expansions come in these foil booster packs, and I decided to keep them as sleeves to keep the contents of the expansions. Moving on, we have HEXplore, the Forests of Adrimon. And up until recently, this was my absolute holy grail when it comes to soloable D&D experiences. But there is another game on this list that took that spot, at least temporarily for now, because as I'll explain, as you'll see later with that other game, I need to play both that game and this back to back to settle and see which one I consider the holy grail. But yeah, this game has a lot of things that you would expect from a board gamification of D&D. So it has the party of characters, the combination of races and classes, the pen and paper elements, the exploration. But the coolest thing about this is that it's not dependent on a campaign booklet or a story booklet or scenario booklet. It's all just procedurally generated, which I absolutely love. When I first played this, I was just absolutely entranced by this game for weeks, and I would just lose myself in the adventure here. It's just one of the best adventuring experiences I've ever had. No other game has scratched the D&D itch more than this. Now, another game that I brought up earlier, which is Folklore, the reason why that one doesn't rank higher for me is because of the Gothic theme. And as I've mentioned many times in a lot of my videos, I'm a sucker for classic D&D tropes. And yeah, I do love that dark Gothic medieval theme, but it's missing your classic dwarf paladins and whatnot. So because of that, it's just missing that almost like generic D&D element for me to enjoy it as an overall D&D from home solo package. They also just released a campaign book for this, which I'm salivating to go through. I just have so many games, but I need to go through that campaign book and experience this because I've heard so many amazing things about it. But yeah, one thing I'll point out now compared to the other game that took this game's spot this year is that this game will offer you the option of controlling a party of characters. The other game lacks that. Now, the downside of that is that, because you're controlling multiple characters, there's some upkeep associated with that, which is unfortunate. But yeah, one big thing of D&D is having a party of characters and having interactions and synergies between the characters when it comes to their abilities and combat. So this game still trumps any other game that I've played in that category. And the upkeep is not as bad as in, say, Folklore. Yeah, that's HEXplore, the Forests of Adrimon. Yet to be determined if it'll be dethroned as my absolute favorite soloable D&D-esque experience. Moving on, we have the Imperium system. I finally got to try it this year, and man, it was way overdue. Without even getting into how good the solo bot is yet, this is just such a good, creative deck builder. It really makes the best of deck building mechanics and offers such a satisfying, thinky, and brain-burning experience. And I also love the civilization theme here, and the way that the game is structured is each civilization has a deck, and you simply pick up a deck for you and one for you to go up against, and you duke it out, and there's so many combinations, especially if you get all the boxes. And the way that the bot works here is just ingenious. You still use the civilization deck for your opposing faction, but the deck acts as a randomizer, and you draw from the deck and you simply check the chart, which results in AI turns taking seconds typically, but it will still feel like you're playing against an opponent. Now, there are a couple of caveats. This game is definitely tough to learn, even with the updated and improved Imperium Horizons rulebook. And my other issue with the game is the scoring at the end, which I just don't find fun, but the journey along the way with how you get there is so satisfying. I really don't mind, and it's about a minor part of the experience. But yeah, I just find the scoring at the end a bit tedious. But yeah, the civilizations are so thematic somehow, despite the component limitation of just using cards and deck building mechanics. They really managed to take these civilizations and make thematic decks out of them. So it's just so impressive. Now this time, I did rank this game ahead of After the Virus, which I did rank as my #1 deck building game, but within the context of other games outside of just the genre of deck building. But I do still think that After the Virus does so much with much less and such a simpler rule set, and it plays so much quicker. But this definitely is the much meatier experience if you're willing to put the time. So as the Imperium system, make sure that you don't sleep on it, and I'm definitely looking forward to the Star Trek iteration of this system, even though I'm not a Trekkie myself. Moving on, we have Star Wars Imperial Assault. And if you like dungeon crawlers and Star Wars, boy, do I have the game for you. So yeah, this is one of the most beautiful board gaming experiences that I've ever had. And it is soloable thanks to the official app, which will allow you to play a campaign just with the core set. I really love the combat in this game. It really reminds me of XCOM, and it really feels like very skirmishy, but it has those RPG elements of you upgrading your character through gear and gaining new abilities over the course of the game. There are also fan-made options for you to solo this. You have an unofficial solo app that allows you to solo the content that originally came with the box, which was not originally soloable. And there's also a card-driven system which will allow you to do the same thing if you want to keep things analog, which I tried and I loved, so I can 100% vouch for it. And there's like a million expansions, and it's actually quite the rabbit hole, so I actually suggest that you check out my purchasing guide for this system if you're completely new to it, which I'll leave a link in the description, because when you first get into this, there's just so many expansions, you're not gonna know what to buy, it's crazy. And not everything is gonna be all that useful when it comes to the solo experience. So yeah, before you go crazy buying everything, make sure that you check out a guide. But honestly, you really don't need everything for this game. I know it's fun buying Star Wars things, but I've only experienced the base game, and I had a lot of fun just with that. I do one day want to go through other campaigns and experience this a bit more. The thing is, I have such a miniature backlog with this that I need to finish, and also I still need to come up with a decent storage solution to facilitate setup and teardown. But yeah, even at just core set level, I can 100% recommend this. It's such a beautiful experience, and you're gonna get your money's worth, because not only will you get the official campaign from the app, you also have the fan-made options, which opens a whole lot more possibilities with what you can play. So that's Star Wars Imperial Assault, one of the best experiences out there. Moving on, we have Star Wars Destiny. And this is a dice and card TCG that was sadly discontinued. But the reason why you can solo it is because I came up with the Star Wars Destiny Encounters system. And this is by far my most played game. And the reason why I came up with it is because I was inspired by Marvel Champions and other LCGs like Lord of the Rings and Arkham Horror, but also I was really inspired by Rise of the Kiraken, which is a competitive multiplayer collectible card game but they came up with this amazing solo system for it. So between the Marvel Champions and Rise of the Kirakan inspiration, I came up with this encounters system, and there's quite a lot of content for it, which will allow you to just deck construct to your heart's content, and you'll have your matchups just like in the movies. So you can create thematic decks if you want, but you can also just create decks just out of, you see like an interesting character with interesting mechanics, and you can deck build around a certain mechanic, okay? So I love, so no other game in my collection by any stretch of the imagination offers the deck construction possibilities that this offers me thanks to the encounter system. And much like in Marvel Champions, the way that encounters works is you have an AI deck that you play against, and you don't have to use official cards for it, kind of like how Ursula works for Lorcana or the Kirakan for Keyforge. Now, unfortunately, it does require some work in order to be able to experience this. You have to either print and play the files that I created, or you can buy them from Artscow, okay? And you also have to, of course, buy as little as a starter deck. If you just buy a starter deck, I designed it so that you can just buy a starter deck and you're gonna be able to experience it. And you can go from there and just purchase singles for your favorite Star Wars characters. I've put a lot of effort so that I create very clear tutorials and rule books, and it's very modular. You can keep the experience simple, or you can add more modules which will support melee strategies, and it will simulate discarding cards from an opponent so that you're able to take advantage of cards that focus on discarding. So to give you an example, I recently started playing Jedi Fallen Order. Way overdue, I know. But yeah, I started playing it and I was like, man, I really want to play a Cal Kestis deck. So I went ahead and built one. And the reason this character exists is because there's fan-made sets that you can download and print, or you can also purchase from certain websites. But yeah, I built a Cal Kestis and Ezra Bridger deck. So just how cool is that? It's just so much fun. But yeah, another reason why I put so much work into this is because it just looks like FFG will never make a soloable Star Wars LCG. We got a non-soloable LCG, and we got a non-soloable TCG. But yeah, folks, that's Star Wars Destiny Encounters, and no other game in my collection comes as close as this does to when I used to deck build back when I played Magic Commander. It's just so simple. I see a character that I like, and I build a deck around them. And while other games that I'll list later kind of do that a bit, the deck construction here just mops the floor with any other game that I've played. And that's not by virtue of just the solo variant. I mean, the game is amazing to begin with, and there's so many cool, amazingly designed sets that were made for multiplayer. But now, thanks to Encounters, I have an outlet for me to have something to play against. So yeah, if you're interested, folks, I'll leave links in the description. But this is not going to leave my top 20 anytime soon. And in fact, it might rank higher in future years. So that's Star Wars Destiny Encounters. Check it out. And now we've arrived at the top 10. Let's start with Fields of Fire. And this is a game that will have a permanent spot on the top 10 for me, no matter what. This is the game that started it all, the reason why I have my channel, my first solo board game ever. Although I definitely would not recommend that this is your first solo board game. I explained last year in detail why this ended up being my first solo board game, so if you're interested, check out my previous year's list and just go to the Fields of Fire entry. I'm not gonna repeat the story here, but yeah, this ended up being my first game, and it almost broke me because of how terrible the rulebook is, but because I pushed through, I ended up loving it so much that it just opened up the hobby for me. And this is yet another banger title from GMT. It is a solo from the ground up game. In this game, you'll command a rifle infantry company in various theaters of war, and during each scenario, you're gonna procedurally generate a map. And the game uses a action deck for everything. There's no dice involved in the game. You flip a card, and this card has multi-uses. The deck is used to check for hits against you or the enemy's units. It's used to determine how many action points you get every phase, among many other tests. But yeah, everything is checked through this deck, which I find very impressive. So 0 dice, which again, as I've mentioned before, I don't dislike dice or anything, but I do appreciate a game that somehow circumvents dice and uses other means of doing checks. Now, once you get past the brutal rulebook, this game will just generate an action movie and a narrative and a story in front of you like very few I've experienced in any other board game. You'll witness in real time how your riflemen step into mines, get hit by artillery, spot machine gun spots, and snipers' nests. And it is just so detailed. You can even med evac your troops to try to save them. You can throw smoke grenades, flares. You even keep track of ammo. But yeah, this is an incredible system all around, and I am looking forward to the deluxe version that has the updated rulebook. I have not gotten my hands on that yet. I have not played this game for a few years as a result. But yeah, the way that this game opened up the tabletop gaming hobby for me and helped me discover the fact that there's solo board gaming experiences out there will always lead me to this granting a permanent top 10 spot for me. So yeah, I can't wait to try the deluxe updated rules for this system. That's Fields of Fire, one of the best titles by GMT Games. Moving on, we have Dune Imperium, and I vividly remember pre-ordering this from the publisher, just having barely learned about it like a couple weeks before it was released, and thinking, another IP-based game. I guess it's just gonna be like poorly put together slop. But I love Dune so much, and it says it has a solo mode, so I have to try it. And boy, were my worries misplaced. This game became one of the most popular board games of all time, and for good reason. It's just incredible, and the solo mode just works so well. The worker placement, the light deck building, the theme, it all just melds together so well. And this is just with the base game. I can't believe I still haven't tried it with the expansions. People say that especially the Rise of Ix brings this game to a whole new level, and I really owe it to myself to try it with that. There's just so many games, but yeah, man, every time this hit the table, this was on my table for weeks, and every time I hit my table, it was just glorious. I really need to have this hit the table again. And AI bot aside, it's an amazing system to begin with. It's just so well thought out, and it even has various difficulty levels for the AI. There's so many characters that you can try and combinations. And I have to reiterate how thematic it is. It's crazy how they took inspiration from the source material and managed to integrate it so well into the system. And it is just so crunchy. I want to also make sure that I mention that. It's so crunchy. I just love the decision making in this game. It's just amazing. So yeah, if you have not tried Dune Imperium, do yourself a favor and give it a shot. Not only is it one of the best board games ever made, it's one of the best solo board games ever made. That's Dune Imperium. Moving on, we have Dragons Down, and this game came out this year. I made a full review, which I'll link in the description if you want to hear my extended thoughts. I also created a couple playthroughs if you want to see how it plays. This game takes huge inspiration from the classic game Magic Realm. Remember earlier when I mentioned that HEXplore's spot was taken? Well, basically, this is the spot where HEXplore was last year. As I mentioned in my review, this game offers one of the most amazing senses of exploration that I have ever experienced. Pretty much my only downside, which I want to go ahead and get out of the way, is the rule set. The rule set is very tough to wrap your head around, and the rulebook, while it's not the worst that I've encountered, it's just not the best. I think it could use some more work. And it's not just me. If you go read some of the commentary or reviews on the forum, it's not just me. The rulebook definitely is a bit of an issue with this game. But once you get past that, man, this game is just incredible. While the base box by itself might not be exactly budget friendly, trust me, you're gonna get your money's worth out of this, because compared to other overland adventuring games, I feel that this game does so much more with less, because you have other adventuring games where you have a fixed map, but then you have this relatively small amount of tiles that this game comes with, but they're double-sided, and then there's other elements to set up that make it so that every map will just feel so different. And it is so sandboxy. It's one of the biggest words that I would use to describe this game. It's super sandboxy, and it is scenario-based, but you can just play the sandbox mode, which is my favorite. But if you want to go outside of that and do something a bit different, there's other scenarios that kind of change the parameters a bit. And there's so many combinations of race and class, and the classes are double-sided, which increases replayability like crazy. And again, that is just with the basic game. I didn't even have the expansion, but I just did not feel at any point that I was missing anything. Although, trust me, I do want to get it when I get a chance, because it's just so easy to integrate. You basically get more of everything. And the replayability just explodes if you add an expansion. So I'm really looking forward to the next crowdfunding campaign where they'll release a new expansion and also do a reprint of all the previous material. I'm definitely gonna get everything for this system because it's just so wonderful. But yeah, if you're willing to wrangle with the rulebook and wrap your head around this system, it really is rewarding. And again, if you want to hear my extended thoughts, go ahead and check out my full review. But that's Dragons Down. Definitely a contender for my top exploration/RPG/D&D-like game of all time. And like I said, I need to play this back-to-back with HEXplore to see where they land, but I really wanted to give this game a boost in ratings this year and give it a bit more recognition because it's new. So I really want to make sure that you get your eyes on this game and take a look, okay? Because I just think it's fantastic. That's Dragons Down. Next, we have Too Many Bones, a dice builder RPG, and this is just such a unique game. Now, it does come at a premium, keep that in mind, as with other chip theory games, but in my opinion, I really think that it is worth it. It works so well at multiple character counts. You can just play controlling one character, you can control 2, 3, up to 4. My favorite character counts for this game is 1, just to try out the characters when they're new, but then I like controlling 3. And I honestly think that it's one of the few games where you can control that many characters and the upkeep doesn't really feel like that much. This offers a relatively quick RPG experience where you just pick a few characters, a tyrant to go up against, and off you go, and you're gonna find loot along the way, wacky encounters, you're gonna level up your characters and add dice to your pool, roll dice for attacking or special abilities, and it also sets up relatively quick. It has a pretty modest table space. Now the one downside is that in order to learn this game, each gear lock, which is the name of the characters, is going to require some extra effort because each gear lock has its own rule set basically that you have to learn. So it is a bit of an obstacle. It's not like you just read the rulebook and you're done. You then have to read your gear lock's rules, and it can be a lot. But yeah, once you get past that, it's amazing. And even at base set, you have so much content, but trust me, you're not going to be satisfied with just the base set because it's just so good. You're going to want to buy everything. And I had to stop myself from buying everything because I knew that I was not ever going to use up all of that content. But I did buy a lot. I bought the other 2 base sets and a couple extra gear locks. But yeah, you're seriously going to want to buy everything. So if you are a low impulse person, just be careful before you get into the system because your wallet is going to hate you. And I did bring up Hoplomachus Victorum earlier. Now, that game, the one advantage that it has over this is that it doesn't need expansions. For Too Many Bones, again, the core box is awesome, but it really, really benefits from having expansions, especially extra gear locks. But I think you can't go wrong with either Hoplomachus or Too Many Bones as your entry into the Chip Theory Games library. So yeah, that's Too Many Bones, one of the coolest and most unique RPG experiences out there. Next, we have the Shadows of Brimstone system, and I'm not gonna show components like I have so far, but basically this is my #1 solo dungeon crawler, not even close, no contest. This is just such an amazing system that is just so versatile, and if you're a miniature painting hobbyist like I am, it really will bring you so much joy. Now, there's not a whole lot of solo games out there that come with miniature sprues, and I did enjoy my time with Warhammer, but Warhammer is not soloable. But Jason, the designer of this game, worked for Games Workshop at some point, and his pedigree checks out because these miniatures, with their particular level of detail, they really remind me of, those early Warhammer miniatures. They're not overly detailed, which a lot of miniatures these days tend to be way too detailed, okay? They have that right level of detail that still makes them fun to paint without them having, to take forever, right? So yeah, the miniatures here are such a delight to assemble and paint. So no other game in my collection offers the outlet that this does. And yeah, I typically avoid painting miniatures because I'd rather just play rather than paint, but this is the exception. And man, when you first get into this system, if you enjoy it, you're gonna want to buy everything because it's just so easy to integrate expansions that it's dangerous. You barely have to learn any rules. It's just more of everything, basically. That's what most expansions are. It's just more of everything, more enemies, more characters, more encounters. The way that this game works with its other world, so basically for the Western set, and just a delightful setting, by the way, with the dark Western setting is just so cool. But yeah, so when you buy a core box like this one, you have a basic mines that you explore when you go dungeon crawling, right? But then there's these other worlds. So this one comes with one other world, like an alien snow other world that you access through randomly found portals while dungeon crawling. So it offers an amazing sense of exploration where you're fighting monsters in a mine, but then you step into a portal and now you're in this alien snow world. And there's other worlds that you can purchase. There's like this swamp worlds, and then there's also like Mad Max style desert, derelict ship. So there's just so many worlds that you can add so that you can randomly find other worlds. And the dungeon crawling here is just so fun, and the combat is kind of reminiscent of how combat works in Warhammer. I understand that this also is very similar to Warhammer Silver Tower, which is another dungeon crawler. But I just particularly enjoy how combat works here with the armor rolls and the defense rolls. And you roll a bunch of d6s for attacks and defense. So it really, really reminds me of Warhammer in a good way. And I recently reviewed one of the newer core sets, which is the Conquistador set. So now you have a Conquistador set that's also cheaper to access if you don't want to pay a bit extra. So I'll leave a link to that. I also have a review of this specifically, but I'll leave a review if you want to hear my extended thoughts on this. And then there's also a Viking set, which I'm yet to paint, but I'm looking forward to it. Each set brings its own little spin to the formula. There's also a feudal Japan set that I purchased because, of course, I just love the system so much. I just want everything, honestly. But I haven't bought everything. A lot of things, but not everything. And then there's an upcoming Egypt-themed set, which I'm really looking forward to. And it also has a really cool town phase in between dungeon crawls where, there's lots of things that can happen to your party. So there's a whole event chart. There's mutations. There's like sanity, kind of like in Arkham Horror. If you lose too much sanity, you can go crazy. But then there's also mutations that can happen to your characters if they get too corrupt. So yeah, the game is super detailed. And if you want that campaign, like role-playing feel, the game can offer that. And it is super versatile too, because it can be a pen and paper experience, or it can be fully board gamified. The game is a bit of a hybrid, and if you want it to be fully board gamified, you're gonna have to put a bit of extra work by printing additional components, but a lot of people don't mind the hybrid. But yeah, this is my uncontested #1 dungeon crawler. I have not experienced something that I've liked more than this when it comes to that genre. And especially if you enjoy miniature assembly and painting, this system will bring you so much joy, man. Just one of my favorite games of all time. I can play it whenever, and it's just such a delight every time this hits the table. Shadows of Brimstone. Moving on, we have Lord of the Rings, the card games. So we're finally arriving at the LCGs, and you're gonna see me ranking them in the next few spots. So I do personally rank this third out of all 3 big soloable LCGs from Fantasy Flight Games. And this was the first one that I ever tried, and trust me, I adore it. But the reason why I rank it behind the other ones is because when it comes to the solo experience here, I feel that you're a bit narrowed in what kind of decks you can build if you want to pilot just one deck. Now, when you want to pilot 2 decks, it does open up possibilities a lot more because you can delegate certain tasks to other decks, and this allows you to spread the distribution of spheres of influence that you can use to build your decks. Or, well, spheres of influence is basically what colors are known as in this game in deck construction terms. But I don't really like piloting 2 decks in this kind of games. Typically, it just makes games take too long. So that's why you'll see later that Marvel Champions, which works much better solo, ranks higher than this. Now, out of all 3, I enjoyed the theme and aesthetic of this the most, but when it comes to the gameplay, the other ones hit the table more often, and I pretty much rank them on the basis of which one I would rather play over the other first. And I do love owning all 3 and giving them their time. I'm definitely more of a variety guy rather than putting all of my money into one system. So I do like having this. I have a couple cycles and I enjoy it. But this is definitely a lot of people's #1 game and an amazing lifestyle game. If you want to go all in, you totally could. Another big advantage that this game has over the other 2 LCGs is that because of its classic fantasy setting, it leans more towards scratching that Magic the Gathering itch. But yeah, that's Lord of the Rings, the card game. Still holds up amazingly, but more often than not, I'd rather play the other 2 LCGs. Next, we have Arkham Horror, the card game. And I think that this is the deeper out of the 3 big LCGs. Now, the reason why I rank it second is mainly because of the campaign commitment. As I mentioned before, I'm not much of a campaign guy. I prefer games that just let me play one-off sessions. And this game does offer that option, but it's just half the experience. And it really shines when you embark on a campaign and you see your deck be improved over the course of it. And while I was definitely impressed the first time I played this game, I did not truly appreciate the depth of it until I started watching this series of strategy guides on YouTube. Seriously, if you want to sink your teeth into a deep and crunchy game, this is it out of all the 3 LCGs. Now, there's a couple other caveats other than the campaign element, which some people might see as a positive. I'm kind of mixed on that. So another caveat is that the core box is very lacking when it comes to content compared to the other 2 LCG core boxes. And also, I don't think this game works very well with just one character. Just like in Lord of the Rings, you're a bit limited in what kind of character you can build, especially if you only own a handful of sets, if you only want to pilot one character. So I always play this two-handed because I also like having extra characters to explore the area, which also deters me from playing it as often as Marvel Champions, which I'll talk about in a second. But when you compound that with the campaign commitment, it just means that this game hits the table less often. But more often than not, I'd rather play it over Lord of the Rings because it's just so deep. And I love the deck construction in this game because it really will make you think differently how you build your deck because of the campaign element of it. Remember that you're going to have a deck that you're going to be stuck with for an entire campaign, so it really changes the dynamic of how you build decks versus how you would build a deck in Magic. You have to have an upgrade path planned out and everything. And I really benefited from net decking here because yeah, it can be tough to learn the meta game and how to prepare long term. Oh, and by the way, this game is very brutal and you're gonna lose a lot and you're gonna see horrible things happen to your characters. So if that's not your thing, you probably want to skip this. This was also my introduction to the fail forward mechanic, which it was so weird for me to wrap my head around that when I first started the hobby. It's like, wait, you lose and you keep playing? How does that work? So it's a bit strange, but yeah, it was the first time I found that mechanic, so pretty interesting. But yeah, that's Arkham Horror, the card game. You definitely could make it your lifestyle game and sink your teeth into this and not really have to play anything else. It's just that good. Moving on, we have Marvel Champions, the card game. My number 1 LCG from Fantasy Flight Games, not even close. The biggest reason why this works so well is because it sets up quick, plays quick, it allows you to just play it in one-off sessions, and it works beautifully solo. Although yes, it can be a bit swingy sometimes because of the advanced card where the enemy will just win out of nowhere by completing their scheme. Does kind of suck a bit when that happens, but it's not bad enough to deter me. You'll learn over time how to circumvent that and to deck build around that, but it'll still happen, don't get me wrong. And this is the only LCG where I buy everything for it and I would not have it any other way. I also love that the hero decks that you buy also act as precons, so you don't even have to worry about deck building if you want to try out a character. And I just can't see how the other 2 LCGs will score higher than this. Just the proof is in the pudding. This is the one that I played the most by far. And to me, folks, the deck construction is the least favorite part when it comes to these LCGs. The only solo deck construction that I've genuinely enjoyed is the one from Star Wars Destiny, because that's a bona fide TCG. These games just try to copy what TCGs do and make them soloable, but the deck construction just isn't there for me. So I'm honestly super thankful that when it comes to Marvel Champions, the deck construction is quick and painless. But if you want to sink your teeth and really get into the meta and find cool combinations and just do awesome deck construction, this also totally offers it. Still not as deep as the other ones, but yeah, if you have a significant pool of cards, this offers amazing deck construction. So yeah, folks, that's Marvel Champions. I love it so much. It's just one of the best solo board games of all time, and it really will scratch that Magic the Gathering / TCG itch like very few games. Moving on to number 2, we have Gloomhaven Jaws of the Lion. This is one of the most amazing experiences that I've ever had. It offers a campaign with a shorter length that will lead you to probably actually finish it, unlike a lot of other big box campaign games that never get finished. And it has such an ingenious way of teaching you the mechanics through these scenarios using the spiral-bound books. And it has great brain-burning gameplay. Now, a lot of people don't care for the Gloomhaven system. I can see why. I did personally quite enjoy it. So much so that I ended up purchasing the bigger cousin, and I went about 20 scenarios in, and I have a lot of content to explore. in the bigger box version. But yeah, I do quite enjoy the system personally. And this goes on sale very often, so you can find it for under $30 typically. There's very few packages in the board gaming hobby that will pack this much punch. It even comes with a well thought out token tray, which I love. And I beat it with 2 characters, but I hear that the optimal way to play this is with 3 characters, which I did try playing 3 characters in the bigger version of Gloomhaven, and it's not too bad, it's totally doable. But yeah, I don't see this leaving my number 2 spot ever, because it was just such a monumental experience for me. It introduced me to dungeon crawlers, legacy games, campaign games, just such a fantastic game, and a campaign length that respects your time. A beautiful learning experience as well. What can I say about Gloomhaven Jaws of the Lion that hasn't been said already? Just a superb game. Shh. It's okay. You'll always be my number 1. They don't see you the way I see you. Maybe next year. Maybe next year.
You can't keep getting away with it!
So yes, Mage Knight, my undisputed number 1 solo board game of all time. I don't ever see this not being the case. This was my first game that I tried after Fields of Fire, which, as atrocious as that rulebook was, this actually served as a palate cleanser, even though this rulebook has a bit of an infamous reputation. But to me, it was a cakewalk after the horrors of Fields of Fire. But fear not, you can always watch Ricky Royale's amazing tutorials to learn how to play this game. And now for my obligatory Ricky Royale bit. God bless Ricky Royale.
Let's play some Mage Knights.
Amen. So yeah, so many games have tried to copy what this does and they borrow from it, but just no game comes close to it. It's such a cool Euro/efficiency puzzle/deck builder wrapped in an adventuring and exploration skin. And as I've mentioned in the past, I find it really cool that Vlada took inspiration from Heroes of Might and Magic for this game, and it really shows. But yeah, this is a game that I could play anytime, and the replayability, even with just the base game, is crazy. The way that exploration works and the way that the market works in this game, no 2 plays will ever feel the same. The puzzle is just so different every time. And when you assault a castle and you puzzle with your big hand of cards to see how you can best the opponent, it's just such a masterpiece of deterministic combat. I do feel like the Lost Legion adds a lot of cool things to the game, so if you can get that expansion, do so. And I really like the dual color cards from the Ultimate Edition. I'm also looking forward to that new expansion. I mean, I'll buy anything related to this game. It's my number 1 game of all time, period. And yeah, when it comes to the question of what game I would take with me to an island if I only were to keep one, without a doubt, it would be Mage Knight. Alright, so those are my top 50 solo board games of all time. I want to thank you so much for watching. If you have any comments, questions, feedback, go ahead and put them in the comments section. And if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.